Hey guys, Shinryu era is just around the corner. So to mark and celebrate the end of the Lufenia era, I thought I'd do a video covering the call abilities that I really love to use during that era. We've actually come a very long way in terms of call abilities. I remember when they were first introduced, they were sort of treated like a bonus, sort of a way to squeeze in extra damage or do a few neat gimmicks. Nowadays though, they have really tremendously evolved given that we now have access to LD call abilities as well, and there are many characters with very interesting utility. To this point, I actually feel that if you have proper call abilities set up for the stage, they can really make or break your run. So in this video, I'll be covering the top call abilities that I really loved using during the Lufenia era. Of course, quick disclaimer that this doesn't mean that these call abilities are so-called the best or what I would recommend everyone to use. There are actually many call abilities that I've also used beyond this, but I'll be covering the call abilities that I sort of use the most and the reasons why I use them the most. First off, honourable mentions on the Enchant and Imperil call abilities. There are quite a number of these, and I tried to list all that I could remember at the top of my mind on the slide here, but there's probably going to be some that I may have forgotten. In the Lufenia or Lufenia Plus era, Enchant and Imperil call abilities have been very useful. You may not need all of them, but having at least one or two different elements in your roster would probably have helped you at some stage of the game. Not only are they very handy to get around resistances, but they also boost the brave damage that you would have done. And in Lufenia or Lufenia Plus stages, there are some orb requirements that sometimes require a certain element. So the Enchant and Imperil call abilities are an easy way to get around that. Of course, moving into the Shinryu era, there will no longer be Lufenia orb requirements on the stages, but this doesn't actually mean that Enchant and Imperil call abilities will reduce in value. One good example would be Braska's FR that's coming up. It does require fire elemental damage to plus 20% the force gauge, and to that end you can use a Lulu LD call to fire enchant the entire party so that everyone is guaranteed to increase the force meter on their turn. Anyway, throughout the Lufenia era, I've definitely used at least some, if not all of these call abilities at some stage of the game, particularly when handling certain orb requirements of the stage. Anyway, moving on from honourable mention, the first category that I'll start off with would be so-called utility related calls. There are two call abilities that I really want to mention in this category, and the first is actually Cait LD call. When Cait LD call was first brought into the game, it was very popular due to the fact that it allowed the caller to launch while the LD call ability was up, and that includes being able to launch every turn inside BT mode. Nowadays, of course, with characters like Selfie, that utility is less used, but that doesn't actually mean that Cait is less valuable. Firstly, the Cait LD call and base call provides turn warping utility, which I've actually used many times in Lufenia Plus even up till this day. Secondly, the Cait LD and base call is really the best call in the game to charge summon meter. In this example here, I'm using Chocobo Summon, and starting off at 0 summon meter field, you can see just by using both versions of Cait call ends up with a fully charged summon meter. If you're using the other summons such as Ifrit, using both versions of Cait call will actually lead to a roughly 60 or 65% fully charged summon meter. The second LD call ability that I want to mention utility wise is Seymour LD call. In my opinion, Seymour LD call is truly amazing. Both versions of his call, assuming he's fully built, will inflict his 3 generic debuffs plus his signature "It is now time to die" debuff. In addition, his LD call also dispels all enemy buffs and delays all enemies by 2 turns. There are other call abilities that carry some of this utility, but Seymour LD call is really notable because it carries all of this utility, which is the buff dispel, the 2-turn delay, and his debuffs all in one call ability. Moving on to defensive calls, the first defensive call that I really want to mention is the Warrior of Light LD call. When you use it, it gives your entire party his signature Brave Shield, and for 3 turns you also get his LD ability whereby HP damage is negated based on the amount of Brave Shield value remaining. This results in very reliable HP damage mitigation. Importantly, it protects the entire party and it doesn't rely on debuffs on the enemy, because there are some stages where the boss can cleanse debuffs or are outright immune to debuffs. Notably also, his base call also provides his Brave Shield to the entire party, so if you need to refresh his Brave Shields to continue absorbing HP damage, you can actually just use his base call to do that. The second defensive call that I want to mention is the Rydia LD call. Rydia LD call is also buff based and it provides the entire party with 3 turns of 100% evasion. Notably also, her buff doesn't have any turn duration, meaning that once you have it up, it lasts until you eat 3 attacks, which means that you can apply it at the earlier parts of the fight and it will remain until the time when you need it. Granted, it will not work on guaranteed hit attacks since this is evasion based, but on the times when you can actually evade the attack, it works really well. The recent King event is a good example of this. You can see during the Behemoth turn when he warps, he gets 3 turns in a row, but with Rydia LD call, you will be able to evade all 3 attacks. The fact that you can use the LD call earlier on and the buff will last until you need it means that you are also not as restricted in the timing of the call as well. The third defensive call that I think deserves mention is Raijin LD call ability. This is different than the previous 2 call abilities because Raijin's call is debuff based, and I guess the only drawback is that it only lasts for 2 turns. But while the debuff is up, the enemy's attack is reduced by 100%, the HP damage that they can do is also reduced by 100%, and they are not able to inflict any debuffs on you. The debuff protection itself is pretty unique to the Raijin LD call. Finally, moving on to offensive calls, there are 2 that I really want to mention, and the first is the Cait LD call. In my opinion, Cait LD call is a really underestimated call ability. By itself, it does have quite a bit of utility already packed into it. For one thing, it batteries the entire party. It also instant breaks all enemies. His call ability also provides the entire party with his Cheerful Gift buff, which is a nice HP regen buff by itself. However, it also shines offensively because when you use the Cait LD call, you get a 2-turn LD call aura that provides the entire party with 100% crit rates, as well as the ability to regen Brave for every Brave attack that you do. This is a very good example of the Cait LD call in action. You can see that when Machina uses his signature HP burst attack, notice a lot of green numbers appearing alongside him. Those represent the Brave regen that he gets per Brave attack that he does, and this is really triggered by the Cait LD call. The 100% crit rate can also be very useful, especially in fights where the enemies can be immune to breaks, because at that point you wouldn't be able to crit it without some form of crit rate boost. Having the Brave regen per Brave attack can also come in very handy in stages where the bosses may have very high Brave damage resistances. This will allow you to still do respectable damage because a lot of your damage would then come from the Brave regen aspect of the LD call aura, and you don't have to rely that much on the Brave attacks that you do. The second and final offensive call that I really want to mention is none other than General Leo LD call, and this may be to date my most favorite call of all, just because of the sheer amount of HP damage that he adds overall. General Leo LD call really shines in characters with many HP dumps in their attacks, so to showcase this, once again this is Machina's burst mode. Watch very closely when Machina does his burst HP attack. You notice that there's one additional rate number of 23,999 damage when he does his HP attack, and that's because the general Leo LD call adds an additional 10% HP damage based off your max brave whenever you do an HP dump. 10% may not seem like much, but don't forget that this is per HP dump. So for example, with Machina's HP burst attack, it actually does 7 HP dumps per burst HP attack. So this is 10% additional HP damage done 7 additional times per turn. Needless to say, over the course of just one BT mode, this actually adds up to considerable extra HP damage done. Not only that, this also works on launch HP damage. So if you look very closely when Machina causes a launch and both Ramza and Garnet follow up, whenever they dump the HP, you also see one additional associated rate number, and that also comes from the general Leo LD call. Drawback wise, I guess there's two key drawbacks. First of all, his additional damage only works on single target attacks, so characters that are AoE heavy such as Garnet won't benefit as much. Secondly, his LD call aura only lasts for 3 turns in total. So while it may affect the entire party, you do need to time it right so that you get most use or most damage out of it. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll just let the burst mode run out till the end so you can see how much damage in total that it does. As always, if you enjoy the content, please leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!